the Vice President of College Counseling from the Princeton Review, Alexis Basserman. For those of you that do not know, Tutor.com and the Princeton Review are actually one and the same company. It's just two different brands, two different services coming out of the same place. And so I'm really excited to get the opportunity to collaborate with the other half of our company and learn quite a bit of information from Alexis. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and hand the presentation over to her. All right, there you go, Alexis.
Okay. Thank you so much, Susan. Let me make sure I am all connected here. Can you see my screen?
We can. Yep.
Perfect.
Looks like you're good to go.
All right, there we are. Well, hello and welcome. My name, as Susan said, is Alexis Basserman, and I lead the college counseling team for the Princeton Review. And my team works directly with high school students as they research, plan for, and apply to college. And I'm really excited to be talking with you this afternoon, so thank you for taking the time. Let me start by just sharing a little bit about my background. I am definitely an educator at heart. And I truly, truly love working with students as they navigate this transition, the transition from high school to college, which for many students is part of a bigger transition for them from childhood into adulthood and into independence. And for that reason, it's a really challenging time for families and for students, and it's also an incredibly exciting time, and it's fun for us to be a part of that. I started my career working in the admission office of a selective small liberal arts college. So I traveled around the country, I visited high schools, I recruited talented students, and then I read their applications and I helped to make decisions as part of what's called the decision committee. Later on, I moved up to the other side of the desk, as we like to say in the admission world, to work as a high school counselor at a private school here in Austin, Texas, which is where I reside now. I went on to earn both an MBA and a Master's of Public Affairs from the University of Texas, and I chose this specific combination of degrees because I have a firm belief that collaboration between business and government is one of the most exciting ways we can create scalable solutions in education. And that's exactly what I spend my days doing at the Princeton Review, and I count myself really lucky to be able to serve students every day and also to collaborate with folks like you. I also just wanted to share, given my audience today, that I am an avid reader and I have so much respect for the important work that you do. But more to the point of today's message, I'm here today to provide you with an overview of the college admission process and to offer some insight into how you might serve patrons who are navigating this process. When we think about the college admissions process and about college applications, there are as many as 7 key components of an applicant's profile. And these are the primary aspects of an application that admission officers are going to really consider when making a decision. So these components are going to vary in importance depending on the size and selectivity of the school, but at the most selective level, every one of these is going to be scrutinized. And in contrast, at the least selective level, some schools may not require essays or require recommendations, and a student's extracurricular profile isn't going to have as much impact as at those selective schools. So keep in mind that there's quite a bit of variation. But at the top of the list, no matter what school we're talking about, the most important things are most likely to be the rigor of the student's curriculum and their performance in their academic classes. So it's really important to think about these two things in conjunction. In general, colleges want to know to what degree a student has chosen to challenge him or herself, and then how successful he or she has been in facing that challenge. So the GPA, we hear a lot about, the grade point average. It's a decent proxy for these two things, but it can be a little bit misleading, which admission officers know. So it's good to keep in mind that colleges actually look at the raw transcript for each student, and they're generally sort of recalculating or thinking differently about the GPA based on their own standards for rigor of that student's curriculum. Next up, we have the student's testing profile. Most students are going to need an SAT or an ACT score to complete their college applications. And there is a growing number of colleges that are sort of de-emphasizing test scores in the selection process, but all students should really take the test, whether or not at the end of the day, all of their colleges will ultimately require them, because it's pretty certain that at least some of their schools are going to require testing. In addition to, in an answer to one of the common questions I get from students, a good score isn't something I can tell you. It's really all relative to the schools of interest for that student. The extracurricular profile is an element that will take on lots of importance, great importance at selective schools, and then less importance at some of the less selective schools. Because colleges, especially residential colleges, they offer an academic community and not just academic programs. They're really interested in finding and bringing strong community contributors to their campuses. So that's why they examine the students' community involvement throughout high school as sort of a way to predict what kind of community member that student's going to be when they get to college. The application form itself, which gets a lot of hype, is actually pretty user-friendly. There are a few different application forms that can be used at lots of different schools. So an example is the Common Application, or a newer form is the Coalition Application. And then some schools, generally public schools, have their own sort of proprietary application form rather than sort of subscribing to one of the general ones that I just mentioned. But regardless of the app type, they typically ask about the same kinds of questions. They want demographic information, they want academic data, and they want testing data. And the most basic app forms for schools that aren't super selective can genuinely be filled out in a matter of minutes. They're pretty easy. When you start talking about selective schools, they add a layer of complexity, a much more time-consuming layer of complexity to the application by requiring a list of activities or a resume, and then one or more essays and letters of recommendation written by high school teachers. So when we're thinking about the timeline of a high school student who's preparing for college, here's a quick overview starting from freshman year. So there are, these are sort of like the areas of focus that will, or at least should be, on your students' minds year by year as they go through high school. So freshman year is genuinely about building the foundation for the academic and extracurricular profile. Students should be trying to build a strong base in their core academic classes, and they should be exploring a range of extracurricular activities to see what interests them. They should be developing their study habits and developing their time management skills, and that's going to allow them to succeed in the future when they start really increasing the challenge of their courses and their activities. In sophomore year, many students are going to begin to sort of define the trajectory for their academic rigor. If they had a pretty easy time in freshman year, they should be choosing some honors or AP courses to strengthen their profile. It's not a great idea to say, hey, I had a 4.0 freshman year in all the regular classes, so I'm just going to keep that up and continue regular courses with a 4.0. Much more compelling to colleges to take on some challenge. And of course, they'd love to see A's in those more rigorous classes as well, but it's very important that a student go ahead and try to challenge themselves, even at the risk of dropping their grades a little bit. Students can, in sophomore year, start to focus their extracurriculars a little bit, so committing more time to just a few things rather than a little time to a ton of different activities. And then also in sophomore year, students are going to take their first practice SAT or PSAT. And that's an exam that's generally administered at their own high school, and it is genuinely just for practice. It provides some baseline idea for the student of how they're going to be likely to fare when they take a real SAT. And it helps them understand where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, and which can inform how they prepare for the SAT. As a side note, some high schools also offer, sort of in addition to or in place of the PSAT, a practice ACT, but those are a lot less common, and it's also, the timing varies pretty widely, so it's kind of hard to stick on a timeline here, but you should know that that exists as an option as well. Summer between sophomore and junior year is a great time for students to dedicate some time to test prep. So students can try both a practice SAT and a practice ACT for free on our website, and that will help them gauge whether one test or another is stronger for them, which is important because colleges are going to accept either one, and it's often the case that regionally high schools will really emphasize one test over the other, but what should be emphasized for the student is which one is stronger for them, not which test other kids they know are taking. So once they have a good sense of which test is stronger for them, whether it's with a test prep book or an online course or even tutoring, students should really dedicate some time to learning how to take that test effectively and efficiently to maximize their score. Junior year is when the heat really turns up. So for most students, this is going to be their most academically rigorous year. And it's also the year that colleges are going to give the most scrutiny to when they are looking at the academic record for a student. Grades matter a lot this year. Rigor matters a lot this year. Junior year is also the year that students should begin to sort of step up their role in extracurricular activities. So they don't necessarily need a leadership title, and I think that gets a lot of hype, but they should be contributing in meaningful ways to the organization, which is its own form of leadership. So doing more than just showing up for the meetings. This is also the year that students should try to complete their testing profile. So taking a first SAT or ACT in the winter, and then another one in the spring. And this is also the year that many kids will truly start digging into college research, building a list and assessing their fit at different colleges. So it's a pretty busy year. The summer between junior and senior year is a great time to build on that research they've started by visiting campuses. And not every student can go on a big college tour, and that is absolutely okay. I always like to point out that even visiting a variety of local colleges, just taking a couple of day trips around the region can really inform students' understanding of the different kinds of schools that exist. So, for example, visiting a small liberal arts college and then a large public research university and then a mid-sized private university, those 3 visits alone, even if they're not schools that the student would ultimately want to attend, they can give so much insight into the different types of campus experiences that are available. Summer is also a really great opportunity to get a head start on college essays. Most of the application prompts are going to be released well in advance, so students can begin writing those essays before the application even opens, which typically happens in August. And then finally in senior year, it's also intense, but in a different sort of way, mostly in that things move really quickly in senior year. The first round of application deadlines is generally November 1st, though there are some that are as early as October 15th. And so students, hit the school year, and right away deadlines are sort of looming for them, and they have to balance those applications with their rigorous senior courses, and hopefully with some leadership roles in their activities. And some students are still trying to fit in a round of testing as well, which can be pretty overwhelming. So as you can see, there is a lot going on throughout high school, with a lot of momentum, particularly building to those last 2 years. So now that we have sort of an overview and a timeline, I'd like to focus on some key areas that frequently become stumbling blocks for students in the admission process. These are areas where many students get stuck, and where they can use some strong mentoring and some support to move forward, which is, I know, exactly what you're interested in providing. So these stumbling blocks include the research and list development process, developing their extracurricular profile with some community involvement, writing essays, of course, understanding the requirements of local schools can be challenging, and then, of course, applying for financial aid and the different types of aid that are available. So let's dig in and start with that college research and list development process. And I want to say off the bat that this applies for all students to a degree, but it is most applicable for students who are planning to apply at selective schools. So in general, those students need to develop a list of between 8 and 12 schools, and they need to balance that list between what we call reach schools, target schools, and likely schools. So likely schools where they have, are well above the averages for the academic profile of that school, and you feel pretty confident about admission. Target schools where they're right in line with the academic profile, sort of in the middle of their test score range and in the middle of their GPA range. And so it's a good application. They feel like they're competitive, but maybe not a slam dunk. And then reach schools where they're a little outside of the range, So it's a reasonable reach, a little outside of the range, and not way outside of the range. To build a strong list, students really need to think about their fit on 3 different levels. So first we have the academic level, and that's a school that has the right majors, the right programs, and that offers a classroom experience that is complementary to their learning style. They want to think about a cultural fit, which is a school that's going to have the kind of campus values, the kinds of activities, and also the kind of community that's going to feel like home to the student. They want a financial fit, of course, which will be a school that can meet the student's financial need and can leave them in a good financial position at graduation. So the following section here are some tools that can help students with their research. So in order to select a school with the right programs for that academic fit, it's really helpful to have a good idea of what you want to study. And as I'm sure you all know, a lot of students really struggle with that beginning piece of knowing what majors and what kinds of programs they will be successful in. So students can often benefit from some type of career-driven personality inventory that can help them identify some of their strengths and some of their personality characteristics that might fit naturally in a particular academic area or even in a particular career. In our counseling, we use an inventory called U-Science, and we've provided the link here. But there are many others available online and in book format that could be a great resource for students. And assessing the sort of different aspects of fit, students also benefit from some type of college guide that can help provide a comparative overview across different schools and allow them to find schools based on particular criteria that they're interested in. So we direct students to guidebooks like our Best 381 Colleges, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and of course also to some of our much more specific titles for students who have special circumstances, like for example, who have learning differences. And then we also direct students to our online tool, which is called Find a College on our website. And I'm going to sort of dive into that in just a moment in the next couple of slides so you can see what's available there, because it's a pretty awesome tool for students that's available for free online. But before we do that, I'll tell you about another useful tool that can be really helpful to students, which is called College Navigator. And this can be great, especially when they're looking at the financial fit of a school. So this is a database of colleges that's populated with information from the National Center for Education Statistics and CES, which is basically a long way of saying it's really good data. It's just very reliable, up-to-date college data. And it's a great tool for students as they're digging deeper into the graduation rate, student indebtedness, and some of those key financial characteristics of a school. Students always love to start their research on the college's own website. You know, that's where their instinct is to go straight to a website. But we actually generally recommend that they go to that college website last, after absorbing some of the comparative information offered by these other tools that I'm referencing. College websites are huge. They're a little bit overwhelming, and it can be hard for a student who doesn't yet have a basic understanding from a comparative standpoint of what sets that school apart. So I'm going to take a quick moment and show you a little bit about our Find a College tool, as I mentioned. So if you go to our website, students can, they have 2 options. If they have a specific school in mind, they can literally write in the name of the school and pull up that school's profile directly. Or if they're looking for some suggestions, they can browse by college or by the location or different majors or other criteria that matter to them. What I love about this tool is the opportunity for considering schools kind of apples to apples, and they can look at summary data across schools for a lot of different areas. So they can look at admission criteria across schools and look at it in the same way for each school. They can look at financial aid data across schools and have the sort of same look and feel to the way you're looking at those key data points across schools. They can look at student outcomes data in the same way. And then what I really love about this tool is benefiting from student opinion data that provides insight into that academic and cultural fit. So we pull thousands and thousands of students about their experience on college campuses and then pull together that opinion data into some really helpful narrative summaries that help the student in a quick and concise way get a snapshot of what it's like to be a student on that campus. So just to give you an idea of the kind of data they're looking at in this tool, there's seven tabs for each college, and here are some of the key data points that they can look at, apples to apples, on each of those tabs. And like I said, that sort of student say section on each of the tabs is an incredibly helpful way for students to get a quick snapshot from the horse's mouth of what it's like to be a student on that campus. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that tool yourselves. Next up, I want to talk about community involvement. So many students need help throughout high school in developing their extracurricular profile. And in general, kids can follow sort of a rule of 3 is what I like to put out there. So pursuing 3 meaningful ongoing activities in high school is a great rule of thumb. Some are going to do more for sure, which is fine, but fewer than 3, it can be problematic. So at least some of these activities should be interactive as well. Activities that make it clear that the student is a contributing, engaged member of their community, which is what shows the college that they will be a contributing, engaged member of their college community as well. So students should also be able to highlight some type of leadership. Like I said before, it doesn't necessarily mean a title. It just means taking initiative and going beyond sort of just showing up. Students also need to keep busy in the summers. So working, volunteering, interning, going to summer camp or a summer program, all totally qualify. Test prep and summer classes might be necessary, but they can't be the only activities that a student is doing in the summer. And then students can also use summer to explore the interests that they talk about in their application. So a student who says they want to study biology and go on a pre-med track, they should spend their summer volunteering at a hospital or shadowing a physician to show that this is a thoughtful choice on their part. The tools that I'm sharing here are kind of sparse, and that's intentional because this piece of a student's profile can and should really be locally driven. It's about involvement in the student's own community, which makes the local library a really great place for them to seek help. It's important to know that students absolutely do not need to spend a ton of money to have a vibrant extracurricular profile. I've included a link to a national database for volunteer opportunities, but you may be in a much better position to help students find local organizations that they can connect with and serve. You can also connect with the local high schools via the counseling office or even just their webpage to become familiar with what kinds of activities, extracurriculars, and events are offered at the high school, and then encourage students to take advantage of what's available to them. Another big challenging area, which won't surprise you, is essay writing. That's sort of what people think of first when they think of college admission. When applying to selective schools, most students are going to need to prepare not just one essay, but multiple essays. So first, the application itself, whether it's the Common App or another type of app, will often require 1 or even 2 primary essays, usually about 500 to 650 words or so. And these essays can be really tough for students because the writing style is very different from what they're accustomed to in their academic classes. It's very different from writing an English paper or a history paper. The style should be narrative, it should be personal, but it also needs to be organized and easy to follow and have a clear beginning, middle, and end. The essay should highlight the student's values, but it should not be a repetition of the student's resume. So there's a lot of do's and don'ts, and it's a pretty tall order, which feels pretty daunting for a lot of kids. And then on top of that main essay or essays, a lot of selective schools will require what are called supplemental essays. So as a completely unbiased example, I'll share some information from my own alma mater, Scripps College. So Scripps accepts the Common Application. So students applying to Scripps will send the main Common App essay of 650 words, but then Scripps also requires a few additional essays on top of that Common App. And those essays are really tactical on the part of the college. They are designed to help the college admission reader figure out whether or not the kid is serious, if this is an application they're just submitting because it's easy to add one more to the Common App, or if that student has really done their research and is truly a fit for, in this case, for Scripps. So the first of these essays that Scripps requires is the most common supplemental essay that you'll find. It's pretty basic. Why Scripps? Why are you applying to Scripps? And these essays are asking kids to, like I said, show that they've done their research and show that they understand what sets Scripps or the other school apart from similar schools. Answering these questions in a thoughtful, personal way, especially a specific way, is really something that challenges a lot of students. So it can be challenging to provide tools to help students with the essays, mainly because the more tools and tips you provide, the less original the output from students tends to be. So the most important thing we want to keep in mind when helping students with their essays is that we want to guide them, but we don't want to direct them. We want to ensure that their voice comes through in their work. So I recommend familiarizing yourself with some frequently used prompts, which are all easily found online, and we've provided the links here. You can find the prompts for the Common application and the Coalition application. They each offer 5 different prompts that students can choose from. And then I'd also really recommend getting familiar with prompts for local or regional universities that your patrons might be considering. So a fun exercise is just to think about how you would answer those questions, and then think about how you might have responded at 18. And at the very least, this might help develop some empathy for the students you're working with. It can be really helpful for students to look, in terms of tools, at collections of successful college essays, or alternatively, just collections of essays. I find it really effective to show students a broad range of published collections of personal essay, just because it's a genre that they're not, they haven't been exposed to very much at this point in their academic career. So there are tons of great published essayists that can help students get a sense of the style of writing without being too prescriptive. So to me, the obvious choice that I love is And the Mott's Bird by Bird for the right student. It's a great choice because it's a book that both provides a great example of thoughtful personal essay, and it provides some insightful tips on the writing process, which is pretty convenient for what they're working on. Next, encouraging students to talk through their ideas before they try to write can really help them think through how to effectively tell a story. And similarly, doing an outline with sort of drafting out that narrative arc in an outline will help them stay focused in their writing. Once they have that content down, students really benefit from some reminders and some assistance on mechanics. So resources for proofreading can definitely be helpful. Next, I want to dive into understanding the local requirements, which can be challenging for a lot of students. So although it seems like going away to college would be the more complex process, there are still lots of stumbling blocks for students who are planning to stay close to home for college, whether that's attending a 2-year school or a 4-year public institution nearby. And often the most challenging aspect of applying locally is simply navigating what can be some complex red tape sometimes. So to make the best choices among their local and regional options, students really need a clear understanding of a few key pieces of information. So first would be basic entry requirements, and taking that one step further, requirements for automatic admission if that's an option. So basically, what are the minimum requirements in terms of high school classes and test scores that a student needs to be considered for admission at a local institution? And then are there thresholds at which a student automatically qualifies for admission based on their GPA and their test scores? They also need to know about the availability and strength of programs. So what are the popular degrees? And not always the same, what are the strongest degrees and programs at various local institutions? They need to know some facts and outcomes to help them make their choices more thoughtful. So for 2-year schools, at what rate do students go on to 4-year colleges? Is the transfer process easy or is it complicated? At 2- and 4-year schools, what are the graduation rates? Are students completing their degrees? And then also, very importantly, especially in conjunction with that last question, what is the average level of student indebtedness upon graduation? All of these details are going to vary really widely from state to state, and even from locality to locality. So in order to gain familiarity, I recommend a couple of different tools and opportunities for you. First is pretty easy and fun, which is just talk to the admission office at local schools. So their recruitment team is probably pretty robust and pretty willing to come and provide an information session, either for your patrons or for your staff. Next, really dive into some websites. I recommend checking out the State Education Agency website to just make sure you're up to speed on state legislation for graduation requirements and for college admission at public institutions in your state. Next, exploring the websites of the colleges themselves, of the local colleges, especially that admission page, can just make sure that you have an understanding of the timeline and the process for local schools. And many of them will actually allow you to complete a sample application, so you can really understand the process from the inside out as an educator, which is a great exercise. And then finally, I recommend connecting with a regional chapter of the long name is the National Association for College Admission Counselors, NACAC, and that's the national organization that brings together high schools, counselors, and college admission professionals into one professional organization. And then there are regional chapters for each of those. So I belong to NACAC. I also belong to TACAC, the Texas ACAC. And there are some that are state-driven and some that a few states in a region combined together to have. So you can look for your regional ACAC for awesome, reliable resources and information that's going to be really pertinent to you and to your students on a much more local level. Finally, financing college is, of course, an enormous concern for most students and for their families. It's a really complex topic that could be the subject of its very own webinar series, but I want to do what I can to provide you with some basics today. So in general, students need a good understanding of the sticker price versus the actual price that they're likely to pay at a particular college. They need to have an understanding of debt and the connection between their academic career or their academic interest or career interest and the likely salary that they would have with that interest, and the student loan payments at various levels of indebtedness. They need to see how all three of those interact. And then students need to have an understanding of the various types of aid, loans, grants, need-based aid, merit-based aid, all those different types of aid that are available to them and the process for applying for it. So the good news is there are some truly awesome tools available to help students navigate this particular piece of the process. So it may be the most daunting, but it's one where there is a lot of support. The first and by far the most important tool that I want you to know about, and if you take nothing away today other than this, it's still a pretty good webinar, the net price calculator. It's important that when we talk to students, we do not assume or let them assume that they can't afford a particular university based on the sticker price, based on that tuition posted on the website. Most colleges officially cost an exorbitant amount of money, and most students who attend those colleges do not pay that amount. So it's really important that, that we help students understand that between need-based and merit-based aid, students can have a tuition bill that looks very manageable, even at very pricey schools that may seem out of reach initially. So in fact, sometimes the selective private schools with the highest price tag also have the highest endowments that enable them to financially support students in need. So federal law actually requires colleges to post what's known as this net price calculator to their websites. And the calculator allows the student to input some basic details from their own financial circumstances, from their family, and then obtain a reasonable estimate of what the institution will cost once the various types of financial aid are factored in. It allows the student to consider an estimate of the actual price rather than just sort of standing in awe looking at the sticker price at each institution. Next up, we have just the FAFSA website. So if you're not familiar with FAFSA, free application for federal student aid, we have the link here. That is the sort of most basic form that students are going to need to fill out when applying for financial aid. And their website has a ton of great explanatory resources, both for students and families and for educators. In a lot of localities, you will find some kind of FAFSA completion services. In fact, some of you may be offering them at the library, which is awesome. But you can typically find workshops offered by, sometimes it's the Chamber of Commerce or some other community-based organization where students and families can go for in-person help completing their applications for need-based aid. And in fact, some of my team members every year go and actually volunteer to provide this service here in Austin. So something to look for as an opportunity for students. A great resource, I love all these resources. Another great resource for helping students think realistically about student debt is called the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And this is an online tool developed by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which can help students understand sort of concrete facts behind their career aspirations. So basically, students can look at a particular career, a particular occupation, and see how much schooling is required for that occupation, how tough it is to secure a job after graduating. You know, are the job opportunities increasing or decreasing? How hard is it to get one of them? And then what is their likely income going to be when they're just starting out? And when they put all that information together, it can be really eye-opening for students and help them think practically about their future. When it comes to merit scholarships, it can feel like trying to find a needle in a haystack. So students are often attracted to some of the really big name, big dollar scholarships, but I just want to put out there that those tend to be extremely selective and tougher applications. So there's not always a lot of bang for your buck there. There are some large scholarship search engines, like one called FastWeb, but they can be challenging to navigate. What I find and share with students is that they tend to get the most bang for their buck by looking at local scholarship opportunities. So scholarships targeted to students in their community or in your community. The high school guidance counselor is going to have a lot of great information on this, but in general, organizations like Rotary, Lions Club, and just local businesses tend to be very excited to support local students. And in conclusion, I just wanted to put together sort of a one-stop shop of basic terms that come up repeatedly in the college process. Many of them we've already talked about today. I'll review really quickly a few others. So in terms of testing, we've talked about the PSAT, the SAT, and the ACT. AP and IB exams are for students that are taking the most advanced courses at their high school. Those have a cumulative exam at the end of the year that can then be translated into college credit. So advanced placement and international baccalaureate exams are a big deal in selective admission. And then SAT subject tests can be sort of a stumbling block for students as well because they are lesser known. So these are much shorter subject-specific tests that kids can take, just like they would take an SAT on an SAT Saturday, but they're about an hour long and they are specific to subject areas. Most students don't need these, but they are required by some of the most selective schools. So students who don't have access to great counseling or aren't particularly savvy about the process may not even realize these tests exist until they realize they were supposed to have been taking them for their admission to these really selective schools. I've talked a lot about selectivity today, and these are really broad categories that I've provided here. But oftentimes when people think about college admission, they really just think about the most selective schools. So those Ivy Plus, which are the schools that you can probably name off the top of your head right now without me having to say anything. But college admission is so much broader and so much more interesting than just a few, 10, 15 schools. So I tend to think in terms of super selective admission, which is certainly interesting, but then there's also selective admission. So schools that are admitting fewer students than they deny. which is mainly what we've been talking about today, though not exclusively. And then unselective admission, which is sort of the reverse. They are admitting more students than they deny. And then open enrollment is the term for schools that, as long as you meet sort of the basic requirements for graduation from your high school, you have a spot at the school. And that's usually the way we would describe community colleges. Deadlines. There are a ton of deadlines in college admission. Like I mentioned before, the earliest tend to happen in November. That would be early action and decision. Regular decision tends to be winter, so a January timeline. And then rolling is what you're going to see at a lot of larger public institutions, where basically they admit students as they apply. So the official deadline may not be until very late in the spring, but it is definitely to a student's advantage to apply earlier in the cycle when they have more spaces to fill. We've talked about different application types, the Common App, we definitely went over quite a bit. The Coalition App is sort of a new competitor to the Common App that's on the scene, which is a pretty interesting thing that we'll watch unfold. It's trying to revolutionize the application process a little bit by introducing a portfolio that students can include in their application of their work throughout high school rather than just essays. And then we also mentioned that many schools have their own school-specific proprietary applications. Financial aid, we talked about need-based, merit-based aid, we talked about the FAFSA. CSS profile is a sort of supplementary financial aid application that private schools often use to gather more information than is provided on the FAFSA. So something to keep an eye out for. And then we definitely talked about that in a price calculator. And then in general, some of the best resources you're going to have in college admission information, and certainly the most reliable, will come from NACAC, the National Association for College Admission Counselors. And like I mentioned, those regional ACACs are going to have some great tools and resources for you that you can definitely trust. So with that in mind, I want to open it up to questions.
Okay, you guys can go ahead and enter questions that you may have in the question box. I have been getting a few throughout the webinar, but most of them were very specific to that library. One of them that I did want to address for everyone, though, was the question of whether practice tests are available just on the Princeton Review site or if they're also available through Tutor.com. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. It's actually what we're going to demonstrate next. So if your library currently offers the Tutor.com Learning Suite, in December, you will be gaining access to the Princeton Review's SAT, ACT Essentials, which includes a practice test for both of those tests, as well as a lot of other stuff. So just to go over that, little thing, that one question. Most of the other questions were about downloads and things that were coming in. So, all right, I see another question coming in. What was the name of the site where students can compare college requirements, cost, etc.? That was actually the Princeton Review Find a College site here. So if you just go to the PrincetonReview.com, there is a link that says admissions on there, and you can go in and open up our Find a College application there. So my daughter has actually used this, and she's found she's really into digital and fine arts, and concerned that there's not a lot of schools out there that offer that. And so she's had a lot of fun going through the Princeton Review's college, Find a College app. So a question for you, Alexis, how do we find our local ACAC? That's a great question.
Sure. So probably the easiest way is to go to the NACAC website. Just Google NACAC, N-A-C-A-C, and they should have a link that directs you to the regional ACACs. Or, you know, it really depends on where you're located, but you can probably type in the name of your state to Google, and then Association for College Admission Counselors, and you'll get probably be directed to the right resource right there.
All right, great. Let me just see if I can pull up. I had the MACA website open while you were actually presenting, because I was looking at it here. So I'm going to pull this over on my screen so you guys can go ahead and see that. It's NACACNET.org. So, and there's a lot of different information that's available on here for you guys. So again, as Alexis said, if we were to look for, I'm trying this out of the gate, so let's see if it works. If we were to look for something like your Texas ACAC, welcome to the Texas Association for College Admissions. So that would take you right to your local one. So,
and I know a couple of the big ones. WACAC is the Western, so if you're on the West Coast, that's for you. SACAC is the Southern. RMACAC is one of my favorites, Rocky Mountain. So.
All right. So there's a lot of them out there. Wonderful. Okay, another question here. We have had Test Prep Company offer Test Prep at our library branch and other branches, but didn't have much success with them. My guess is that maybe you had low participation or turnout, Jessica. I'm not sure how you measured the success, but how would you recommend offering test practice? What resources to pull tests and proctor effectively? Is that something that you've been involved in, Alexis, at all, doing test prep within institutions?
I haven't extensively. Just knowing students, I think some of the things that can be particularly helpful for them is basically figuring out what works with their schedules. Making sure that the time available is sort of in conjunction with what's going on with the local high schools. And then also the sort of live online classes can be a great resource for students because they can do it at their own pace.
Okay. Yeah, and that's one thing with this new SAT, ACT Essentials is that they will be able to do it on their own time and on their own schedule. It will be available that way. But Jessica, thinking about, some of the marketing and outreach that we help our libraries do, I think a lot of it has to do with reaching the right audience. And so when we're having our libraries approach or trying to build awareness of their Tutor.com program, one of the audiences that they target would be guidance counselors at the local high school. And they'll take a brochure in or see if they can invite them into the library for like a demo and donuts type of Saturday. And you start building that relationship with the guidance counselors. They're the ones that are going to know which students are going through this process, who are their college-bound students, and then you can give them a flyer or a bookmark or something with the test date in order to make more students aware, especially those that may not come into the library on a regular basis. Because unfortunately, there's so many who still think libraries are just an old building full of books, and we definitely have to get past that old stereotype. So if you'd like to talk about other outreach and marketing ideas, I'd be more than happy to meet with you one-on-one, Jessica, and go through some of those. So another question we have, will the Find a College site be included in the Learning Suite? Not yet. And the reason we want to work it in there, but there was a technical glitch that sort of we hit with it. When we launch it in the Tutor.com site, we want students to be able to save a school profile. So we don't want them to have to go in every single time, choose the majors or choose the price point or choose the target scores. We don't want them to have to fill that out every time. And so we're looking for a way to do some kind of single sign-on authentication in order to pull that, what we call a school profile, into the SAT, ACT Essentials. But unfortunately, we're not there yet, Sheila. So question for you, Alexis. Are schools moving away from the Common App to use the other application, the Coalition app that you mentioned?
That's a great question, and the answer is not yet. Many schools have started accepting it in addition to the Common App or in addition to their own proprietary app, but this current year is the first application cycle that it's live, so I think it's really sort of a test year for a lot of institutions to decide how they're going to proceed. So at this point, it's definitely not replacing the Common App at any at any real level, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on moving forward.
Okay, good. Another good question, and I'm actually wondering this myself for my own daughter. How do you decide whether you should take the SAT or ACT? Other than taking a bunch of practice tests and seeing which one's best, are there characteristics of each test to be aware of?
Yes, that's such a great question. In general, so if a student has taken both practice tests or has taken multiple practice tests and the scores are looking pretty comparable, because you can do an online sort of assessment of basically figuring out which one you're doing better on. If it looks like you're doing about the same on either test, I always say which one is more comfortable for the student to take. Which one is feeling better, which one, doesn't make them cringe at the idea of spending some real hours dedicated to test prep. There is genuinely not a right or wrong answer from the institutional side. Colleges are happy to take either. So knowing that this is going to, be some hours dedicated for the student, often there's sort of a gut reaction from students of this test feels more intuitive to me. This test feels like it's tricking me, or this feels like I get it. And going with the one that feels right on a gut level makes a lot of sense if the scores are really comparable between the two.
Okay, thank you. All right, next question comes from Evelyn. Evelyn, and this one's for me, test prep access, where can we send students? So Evelyn, just so you know, you guys, since you do already offer Tutor.com, again, in December, the test prep is actually going to become part of your Tutor.com program, so students will be able to get in there. But you also asked another question, about the affordability of test prep. And of course, working here, I would always say, go to the Princeton Review. But I do realize that not all parents can necessarily afford that, and that you guys work with some students in disadvantaged areas as well, and it may be difficult. And so one of my suggestions, just from looking at other library resources that have been offered, would be to check the actual test prep sites first. Okay, if you are working with a student that cannot afford some kind of professional test prep and you don't have Tutor.com at your library, definitely consider going to the College Board site and showing them some of the resources available there, as well as the, just the ACT prep as well. So that's a tough situation, and one of the things that we're definitely trying to equalize by bringing the high-quality Princeton Review test prep into the Tutor.com service so students can access that at no additional cost. All right, what about parents who think they need to hire a private admissions consultant? Good question. Talking about those disadvantaged students and the unbalance between, resources for different students. Alexis, do you
Sure.
have suggestions on that for the private admissions counseling? Okay.
Sure. So, I mean, the important thing to know is that not all students have equal access to great college advising, right? So for the students who are attending a school with a great ratio, with well-prepared, knowledgeable counselors, it's fair to point out that they already have that great resource available to them, that they should take advantage of that. But there are students who are attending a school with an average ratio for their guidance counselor of the national average is 400 and change to 1, and at that level it's really hard for a counselor to be able to provide very personalized guidance, especially for those students, those top performing students who are often really self-motivated and independent, but who are navigating the most complex piece of the college process. Sometimes it can be really beneficial for those students to have somebody with additional expertise, or just additional time with somebody with that expertise to go through the process. So I'd say it really varies. That kind of independent counseling is appropriate for some students and not appropriate for all.
All right, I have 2 more questions. One is going to be answered when we go through the Tutor.com demonstration. So the last question that I'm going to go ahead and read out for the sake of time has to do with the activities. You mentioned 3 or more meaningful activities. Did you mean 3 ongoing volunteering activities, or do school and sports and music activities count in that?
School sports and music activities absolutely count in that. When I said ongoing, what I mean to imply is that some students will say, oh, I did this service event, read 3 hours one Saturday freshman year, and consider that one of their activities. To me, a series of those events monthly over the course of high school qualifies as a meaningful ongoing activity. But the one time, or even if it's one time per year, it isn't, really representing a significant commitment on the part of the student. So 3 things that they're doing on a regular basis throughout high school, and hopefully showing increased commitment over time and increased, for lack of a better word, leadership, but really showing sort of ownership and engagement in that activity at an increased level over time. And many students go way above that, and that's great. But when you're seeing much below that, college admission officers, especially at the selective schools, are like, how are you engaging in your community, and how are you going to engage when you get here?
Okay, great. Great. All right. So we are going to go ahead and move forward then, you guys. I do encourage you to continue asking questions. For those questions we didn't get to, I will be responding, Alexis or I will be responding to you via email on those questions. So if you have more, please enter them. But I don't want to keep you guys too much over the time today. So we're going to hop into just a really quick look at the new Tutor.com Learning Suite, or newly enhanced Tutor.com Learning Suite. As I mentioned, in December, we are going to be adding, oh, and I have to pause this because I was using this. I'm sorry, you guys are probably going to see my kids. Oh, no, it went blank. Okay. I was using this slideshow at the California Library Association conference, and so now it's all set up to advance slides automatically, and it's going to go too quick on me. So we'll go with it, okay? So the new SAT, ACT Essentials is going to be added to all Tutor.com library programs at no additional charge, and we're doing a beta test this month with about 5 different libraries, and then come December, we're going to start rolling them out to every single library. So again, no additional charge for this service. And by putting Tutor.com on-demand tutoring together with the Princeton Review's test prep, we are going to be giving your patrons a great start down that college path, because we're going to be able to help them achieve an acceptable GPA with our on-demand tutoring. With the Princeton Review's test prep, they're going to be able to score well on the SAT and ACT and hit their target scores. Using our right tutors, both real-time and asynchronous tutors, they'll be able to submit very strong application essays. They can use the Princeton Review's advice. We'll have a resources section in there that gives articles from Princeton Review experts about choosing the best fit school, as well as filling out things such as the FAFSA and finding financial aid. So this would be a great place for your patrons to go for their first stop down the college preparation path. When we do add it, it's going to come in. This is a screenshot of the Tutor.com entry page. It is going to come in right at the top as one of your options, SAT and ACT Essentials. When the student clicks on this, in order for us to save their results, they will have to have created a free Tutor.com account. There's no charge for it, but we need to be able to save their results. So they'll create an account, click on SAT, ACT Essentials, and come into the landing page where they then get to choose between the SAT or the ACT. They can do both of these. There's no limit on, we don't say, oh, you chose the SAT, stick to it. So this is one way they can check out the two different tests and see which one they like. Once they choose their test, they're going to come in and they'll be able to set their target test date as well as the target score that they want to achieve. This is going to help us build a study plan for them based on their score results, their target score, and their test date. They'll have this dashboard available that shows them exactly what they need to do. So one of the first things is learning about the strategies. And they'll come in and we'll show them the different strategies that they need to learn for taking the test. And they go through that, and then they can take your practice test. Now, something that you won't find in any other electronic resource through libraries is the full-length practice test for both the SAT and ACT. The other thing about this is you can take it as a timed test, just as you would for the real thing. You can take it as time and a half, double time, or untimed. So this can help students progress through the preparation period. Again, it covers all of the different sections on both tests, depending on which one you're taking. Once they've finished it, they're going to get a full score report. So we show them what they would have scored. We break it down by each section of the test and the questions that they missed as well. We tell them, of course, where they did well, because everybody wants to know that. And then we show them areas of focus. And within these areas of focus, we have different resources for them. So they can go ahead and go through the resources and retake the test. And it's going to track their results over time. So what kind of resources do we have for the students? Well, it depends on which areas they need to focus in, but we've broken it down into what we call assessment objectives. And for every assessment objective in which the student needs to work, we're going to provide them with either video lessons that cover the test-taking strategies as well as content, and we're also going to provide practice drills. So they can go ahead and take the drill. It's a set of questions like a practice quiz. They can see their progress through each of their assessment objectives or areas of focus, and they can always go back to it as well. So this is very self-paced, but we're giving them a roadmap through which they can work in order to raise that score to where they need. In addition, we are going to have, as I mentioned before, the resources tab, which is going to give them a lot of different advice articles from the Princeton Review experts on how to choose a school, how to apply for financial aid. I think there's going to be like 20, I think it's about 20 to 25 of the most popular articles from the Princeton Review's resources will be in here. So I can't do a live demo yet for you just because it's actually supposed to launch today on my test site. I'm hoping it actually happens and I get to play with it tonight. But we will be doing a live demonstration of this service on December 1st. So if anyone's interested in seeing it go live, go through training, let us know. If you don't currently have Tutor.com and you want to learn more, you can contact Alyssa Loro, our account manager, at alyssa.loro@tutor.com. Of course, if you do already offer Tutor.com, just go to our Client Resource Center to the Contact Us page, and you'll see all of the pictures of me and Bob, Alyssa, and Ralph, and you can get our contact information from there. So again, I don't want to hold you too late. I saw some more questions coming through that I'm going to go ahead and run through and make sure that I've answered everything that we need to answer here. Yes, Edith, as I mentioned, it's not quite right. Edith is asking if we have a link to test it yet, and we don't yet. But very, very soon, it will be ready. And then again, for Tutor.com current clients, we will start rolling it out to all of our library clients on or around December 1st, and we'll take probably a week or two to get those all out to you guys. So when the kids come back from their winter break, this is something that you can be promoting quite heavily to them. Any library that is new to Tutor.com and signing up will be able to have this from the onset as long as they start after that December 1st rollout date. When should you plan on starting to market? I would say you can give them teasers if you want to now. We are going to be writing up a newsletter article. We have our SAT and ACT posters, flyers, and bookmarks that you can use already. Those are all on the Client Resource Center. But if you don't want to tease them about it and you just want to announce it once it's out, I would wait until 1st of December or even after the winter break there. All right. Students can take these tests as many times as they need as long as they follow through to the recommended resources. I believe that they can actually take the test multiple times, but they don't have to go through all of the resources either. The reason I say that is because up here at the top, you see this practice test button. It's my understanding that when they click on the practice test button, they'll have the option to retake it. So say they go through, half of the resources and they decide, oh, wait, I think I got it. I can do this better. They can go ahead and retake that test. So these are just our guidelines and recommendations for what they need to do to hit their target score. All right, any other questions for me or Alexis at this point in time? All right. I do have to give you guys another tip just from one of our favorite librarians, Mary. Mary's library offers Tutor.com. She's been working with us for quite some time, and she says that we used the Princeton Review book when our children looked at college. What a great resource. This book helped our children find the perfect colleges, and I tell every parent I know to use the Princeton Review. So thank you, Mary, for that unsolicited commercial. I love that. And, as I mentioned, I have a daughter that's a sophomore in high school and another one that's in 8th grade this year, and my sophomore's using it like crazy. and we're really finding it helpful to lower the stress and the burden and the anxiety that comes along with this really difficult process. So I want to thank you guys all for joining us today. I don't see any other questions coming through, and so we're going to go ahead and end the webinar. You should receive a follow-up email from us that has a link to the recording, so you can go back and review. If you were not able to download any of the handouts, please email me, susan.delrosario@tutor.com, and I will get those sent over to you directly via email. So thanks so much, and everybody have a great day.